Hi, YouTube. My name's Bobby. Today I'd like to share with you my story of how I got SIBO and how I healed myself and how I got it again, or at least some degree of digestive issues. So, my story started about 3 years ago when my wife and I purchased our first house together. And shortly after, it was within 3 months that I noticed my digestion was starting to suffer. First, I got like a fullness in my left abdomen. Then it kind of progressed from there. I got diarrhea. I started having fatigue. Was diagnosed with adrenal fatigue at some point. So diarrhea, fatigue, just depression. I was really depressed, crying for no reason, and just sleeping poorly. I mean, you name it. It just something was not right, and I didn't know what it was. I tried adjusting my diet, which helped to a certain degree. Then I started taking a lot of supplements, and I'm sure that a lot of you can relate to that are watching this video who have had any sort of digestive issues for any period of time. Um, so, like I said, 3 years ago, and I'm glancing at some notes here so I can give you guys all the information that I want to give to you. Um, so, seemingly, this was, an issue that was just related to me because my wife, she seemed unaffected by anything that was going on. And 3 months after we moved in, I'm sick. She's just fine, which is weird. So at first we didn't suspect the house. Now fast forward to about 6 months ago, my wife started having digestive complaints. Actually, she didn't even complain about it. She said, "Oh, I'm gonna have diarrhea." After eating something that is maybe kind of greasy, something that I would never eat myself, but was okay for her. So she'd eat this and she'd start complaining, "Oh, I have cramps," or, "Oh, I just had diarrhea," those sorts of complaints. I said, "It sounds like you have SIBO. It sounds like you have exactly what I've been having these past few years." And eventually, and most recently, this is about 2, 3 months ago now. My wife, she had really bad abdominal pain, and I had to come home from work, take her to the doctor. They started pushing on her abdomen. Excuse me, and they found that, they thought that she was having a gallbladder attack or a gallstone attack, whatever you'd like to call it. Um, and so a few days later, she went and had an ultrasound, and sure enough, they had found some gallstones in there. And that's not typical for her family, for her hereditary background. Um, so, that being said, um, now prior to this, like a little bit before she was diagnosed with the gallstones here, I had started doing liver flushing. I had done a little bit of reading after my doctor ran some tests, and she said that, well, your uh, your genetic makeup or the testing that they did suggested that I had a hard time detoxifying my body. So that's just the way I'm set up. There's nothing that I can really do to change my genetics in that regard, but I can do things to help myself out, like take certain supplements like glutathione and acetylcysteine. All these, maybe milk thistle too would help build your liver cells. But so this is actually what I did to heal myself is liver flushing. Um, I read some testimonials. People said that flushing their liver got rid of their diarrhea. It cured them of their chronic diarrhea. Especially, I found out if you have pale stools, that is an indication that your liver is performing poorly, or the bile is not um, being injected in the small intestine in some sufficient amounts, which can indicate that maybe you have some um, some bile stones or liver stones or whatever you'd like to call them. Basically, your bile has thickened to a point where it's not flowing properly anymore. So either you have stones or the bile's just thick and it's not moving. It's like a sludge type material. So anyway, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about kind of how I figured out here that there was mold in our house, and why I think it is the environment that's making us both sick. So I had done 4 liver flushes. Now the 4th one actually put me in the hospital because I believe that I was dehydrated. I was not prepared for the 4th flush adequately. I should have spent more time drinking water that previous week to make sure that I wasn't dehydrated at the end of the flush. So what sent me to the hospital is I started getting really nauseous after I ate after the flush, and that made me really weak and like I could barely stand. I had cold chills. I felt really, really weak and just wiped. And I couldn't drink any fluids because I was nauseous. I knew I was going to puke if I drank anything. And so went to the hospital. They did, their typical, emergency room stuff. They did CT scan, blood work, urine work, and the only thing that came back abnormal was my liver enzymes were a bit elevated, which can happen after a flush. So anyway, after that 4th flush, it was the next week. So after I was in the hospital, the next week, I already had plans to go to Florida. So spend a nice week away from Iowa, away from the cold, which I did. And I thoroughly enjoyed myself. Now, usually, I have to stick to a strict diet because if I don't, I get sick. Like, I get diarrhea, I get bloating, my sleep problems come back, my mood suffers. I'm just not motivated to do anything. I'm just wiped. I don't want to do anything that's strenuous or like I feel like I'm toxic, like my whole body just feels bleh. So, when I was in Florida though, stark contrast, okay? We were away from everything that we would normally be exposed to here, including our house, right? And I had had our house tested already for mold by the time that we went to Florida, and I found out that our house did have mold. The readings in our basement were very, very high, but I didn't realize until recently that even if you're not living in the same area as the mold is found, even if the mold is behind a closed door, which is in our case, it can still affect your health adversely because of the mycotoxins that are released into the air. And if you have central air, central heat, whatever, anytime your HVAC system is turned on, no matter where that mold is, it will pull the mold from wherever it is, the spores, the mycotoxins, whatever they are, it gets airborne and it will go everywhere in your house. You are screwed no matter where you live or habitate in that house. So, that being learned, and not quite soon enough, we had our drywall removed before I came across this information, and the drywall, I now know, was not removed properly. It was just ripped out, and the drywall was the part that the mold was growing on. So the drywall was ripped out. There was no area that was sectioned off, quarantined off to remove this stuff. It was just ripped out and replaced. So now, pretty sure there's mold all over our house. Don't know what to do about it. Still working on that. But, okay, so getting back to Florida. Down in Florida, I ate whatever I wanted. And with little consequence, really. I mean, compared to what I'm used to, like maybe a little bit of cramping, but no diarrhea. My stools were solid. They were formed. They were brown, not like tan. They were brown, like a darker brown. So my bile was flowing very, very well. Um, and I just had a great time down there. I didn't have any anxiety. And, some of you might say, well, you were on vacation. Well, yeah, I was on vacation, but I've been on vacation before and I was still miserable. My gut was not happy with me at all. And this was the best I had felt in 2 years. I came back and I had a doctor's appointment the very next day after I got back from Florida. And I told her how good I felt. Like, just absolutely wonderful. I said, this is the best I've felt in 2 years. And she was so impressed. And I told her, everything I'd been doing. I said, and by the way, at this point, I had gotten 400, that's right, 400 stones out doing this flush, which, by the way, there's going to be a link in the description to the book. You can download it for free from my Google Drive. You don't need to supply your email address or any of that extra stuff that some people like to do. You can just download it. I want this information to be free and accessible for everybody because I know that there's a lot of people suffering out there unnecessarily, and the liver flush is relatively unknown. I mean, people that I talk to, they have no idea what a liver flush is, and I'll go into detail about that before the end of the video. So after I got back from Florida, I was good. I felt great for weeks afterwards, like 2-3 weeks, and then I started noticing a little bit of cramps again, and kind of things going down that road again where I'm not going to feel well. So I had to start watching what I was eating again, and I know that if I continue down that road that I'm going to continue to be sick. So basically I think our house is the cause of our problems, if you hadn't gathered that by now. Let me talk a little bit about the importance of liver and gallbladder function, okay? So the liver performs literally thousands and thousands of functions per day. I mean, in the tens of thousands. I've read some places it's 13,000 functions. I've read other places, 20,000. It does a lot of stuff, okay? It is responsible for detoxifying your entire body. That includes removing old cells that have died off, which, by the way, you turn over thousands upon thousands of cells every day. They die and they are replaced with new cells. If your liver is backed up and you can't remove old cells, that causes problems. Those are free radicals, and they can cause damage to other cells in your body. So liver function is very important. It removes and detoxifies all of these harmful substances from your body. Now, the kidneys have some role in that as well, but the liver is your body's master detoxifier. And it also makes the master detoxifying compound in your body called glutathione, which is a very, very powerful antioxidant. And without it, you would die, simply. And without your liver, you would die. Now, some people say that you can live without your gallbladder. And that is true. You can live without your gallbladder. But I heard this analogy once, and I want to share it with you. So imagine you have a problem with your plumbing in your house, and you have a plumber come over and fix it, quote unquote, fix it, right? But instead of fixing it, he just removes all the faucets from your house and lets the water just trickle in all willy-nilly, just whenever it wants. That's essentially what happens when you have your gallbladder removed. removed, because your gallbladder is a storage area for bile. And without it, whatever bile that your liver does produce is dumped immediately into your small intestine, whether you've consumed any food or not. So essentially what that means is you put some food in, right? Your bile, if you didn't know, is responsible for breaking down fats. It's also a way for your body to get rid of toxins through the digestive system. So very important in two regards, right? Because you need fats. Fats are important for your brain health. If you don't have fats, your brain is like 60% fat. If you don't have fats, if you're not digesting your fats properly, you will have like brain fog. You will have like maybe some depression or something like that, because you're not breaking those things down properly. Your brain's not able to utilize those fat-soluble things that you're putting in your body, or fat-soluble vitamins too, for that matter. If your bile flow is insufficient, your liver's not working, you will not be able to absorb those fat-soluble vitamins very well because they're not being broken down. So anyway, where am I getting to? The bile. So your bile is injected into the small intestine, and if you don't have the gallbladder in place, it's just going to trickle in whenever it wants from the liver to the small intestine. Now, what happens is when you eat a large fatty meal and you don't have a gallbladder, some people have complained that after getting their gallbladder removed, they still can't digest these fatty foods because the bile isn't being injected into the small intestine in sufficient quantities to digest the fatty food that they just ate, because there is no gallbladder to store the bile. It's just automatically going right into the small intestine. So you can imagine what kind of a problem that causes. Now, how does not being able to digest fats relate to SIBO or IBS for that matter? Well, most cases of IBS are actually SIBO. Now that they're doing more research, they're finding out, well, the cause of IBS is actually SIBO. But what causes SIBO? There seems to be a lot of controversy on this. Not necessarily controversy, but just, there are different root causes for each individual person. But I have found that for me, it's not digesting fats properly. Bile actually performs another function, if you can imagine that. The body is very smart. Bile regulates the peristalsis, which is the normal movement of your bowels, pushing food along towards its exit. It regulates a peristalsis, especially in the ileocecal valve, which is in between your small intestine and your large intestine. Now, I've learned a lot of this from listening to, there's an author, which is part of the book, which I'm going to put in the description below. His name is Andreas Moritz, and he has several YouTube videos in addition to several books where he's done interviews with physicians. And they ask him questions about the liver flush that he recommends, and about what the function of the bile is in the liver and all that. If your peristalsis is not right, you can have SIBO, because the movement's not right. The fecal material backs up from the large intestine to the small intestine and allows bacteria to translocate in the wrong place. So, and in addition to, bile promotes a healthy microbiome. It helps the correct bacteria grow, and it helps the incorrect bacteria have an inhospitable environment to proliferate. So, bile's great. It's like its own antibiotic. If you have good bile flow, then it might be very, very hard for you to have SIBO. And that has been the case for me. And probably not just for me, probably a lot of other people are in a similar situation. Maybe you don't have the mold toxicity, maybe your house is okay, but maybe, maybe when you go outside, maybe your air quality isn't as great. Maybe your water supply is tainted. Who knows? But everything is detoxified through the liver and the kidneys to a certain extent, but mainly the liver. That is your main detoxifying organ in the body. If your liver does not function properly, you are going to feel like crap. And you're probably going to have chronic disease as well, because your liver is also part of your immune system. But I'm not going to get into detail. Read the book in the description. There's so many things that the liver does, I can't even begin to tell you. But I am super excited to share all this information with you because it has changed my life for the better. Okay, so what is the liver flush? What does it consist of? What kind of results can you expect? So the liver flush, and there's no easy way to put this. I mean, it's kind of a gross procedure. I mean, it really is. So I'm going to explain it briefly, but it's all in the book, outlined very clearly, the dosages and everything that you need to take for this, okay? So first it starts out with a prep period, okay? So 5 days before you do the flush, 5 days, okay? You need to start this prep procedure, okay? And arguably before that, because it is recommended to do a kidney flush before you do the liver flush. So, but before you're starting the liver flush, you are going to drink a large amount of apple juice per day. I believe it's 32 ounces. I never do the apple juice personally. You can drink the apple juice for 5 days prior to, or not in addition to, or you can take a supplement called malic acid. Malic acid is found in high concentrations in apples and apple juice, as long as it's not processed apple juice with like sugar added and that stuff. Okay, it's found in high concentrations. Now what the malic acid does is it softens up any gallstones that you may have lingering in your liver or in your gallbladder. By the way, most gallstones are formed in the liver, not in the gallbladder, as modern medicine would have you believe, in the liver. So, another reason, if you have your gallbladder removed, you're probably not going to take care of the problem because you still have stones in your liver. It's not going to fix anything. Okay, so that malic acid softens the stones, right? And that's going to make it easy for them to pass through your liver and your gallbladder without getting stuck. Because if you have a hard stone get stuck in a bile duct, you're going to be in a lot of pain, and you're probably going to want to go to the emergency room right away. Malic acid softens the stones. The day of the flush, you stop eating, and you're going to eat light meals, no fat, and preferably a vegan diet is what the author recommends that whole week prior to the flush. Okay, so no eating after 1 p.m. and you're going to eat a no-fat diet on the day of the flush. So like veggies and fruit and that sort of thing, all before 1 p.m. Then during that day, sometime you want to do an enema, okay, or have a colonic, preferably a colonic because it's more effective at removing any debris from your colon or whatnot, but an enema is the substitute for the colonic, but he does recommend the colonic in the book. That's going to kind of get things moving in your intestines because that's what you need if you're going to do a flush. These stones need to come out and they can't be obstructed, otherwise they might not even come out at all. So the step after doing the enema is going to be start drinking an Epsom salt solution. No, I got a message. Start drinking an Epsom salt solution. So you're saying, well, Epsom salt, isn't that like what you put in your bath water? Yes, it's the same thing, but you have to get the food grade stuff with no additives. So it's just straight magnesium sulfate is what Epsom salts really are. That's their scientific name. And it needs to be the food grade. So no additives, food grade, okay? And even some packaging, even if it says food grade, not to ingest the Epsom salts. I can tell you that I've taken them. There's multiple other people that have taken them. There's a liver flush group on Facebook that can answer your questions about what Epsom salt to get. And I can post a link to that below as well, so you can talk to other people who have done this flush, not just listen to some guy ramble about his own story. You can actually talk to real people and see what their experiences were doing this. So once you do the Epsom salt, what that does is that's a diuretic. So that's going to pull a lot of water from your body, and it's going to pull it all into your intestines. So you're going to have diarrhea, and it's going to clean you out, right? So that's why it's important to be very hydrated before you go into this. So once you do the Epsom salt, and you have diarrhea or whatnot, later that night, right before you go to bed, you're going to drink a mixture containing a half a cup of olive oil mixed with some juice. Yeah, that's nasty. It's not the best tasting stuff ever, but trust me, it is worth it. So, once you drink this, you lay down right away. Do not do anything else. Drink the solution, lay down. Now, what that does, since there's such a high fat content in that cup that you just drank, okay, the gallbladder is going to contract, right? And hopefully, if you did the prep correctly and everything, you're going to get some stones out. In the morning, when you go to the bathroom, because you'll probably have to go again, you should get little stones out. And most of these are like a greenish color, but they can be tan, they can be white. And if they are made mostly of cholesterol, which most stones are, they will float in the toilet. So you'll know that you got stones out. Now, if they're calcified, they probably won't float. They'll sink to the bottom. They might be like a whitish color. But that is relatively uncommon from what I've read and what I've heard other people saying. Most stones will float. And some of them are very large. Some of them are small. And some might just be little pieces. Like you can't even really count them, but you know that they're there because they're floating. So, but if you don't get a lot out your first time, don't be discouraged. It was my second or third flush that I got the most out, and they were huge. I mean, they were like, some of them were almost the size of quarters. They were gross. I mean, and some people say, well, this flush procedure is gross. You know, I'll tell them about it and be like, well, that sounds disgusting. And I'm like, the only thing more disgusting than doing the flush is keeping all that toxic sludge inside your body. You were not meant to carry that around in your body. And I think it's because of the chemicals that we have nowadays that weren't in existence 100 years ago. It's the way we process our food, our water, the quality of our air nowadays is not good. You know, we just got so much toxicity going on in this world, and that is the reason for the stones, from what I understand. So, and one more addition to that is, why does your body form stones? Well, this is how I understand it, and this is how I believe Andreas Moritz would explain it as well. Your body, like I said, gathers all these toxins in the liver, right? And they could do a lot of damage if these toxins were allowed to just float freely throughout the body. You know, you could potentially die from some of these things, but your liver and your body is smart enough to encapsulate these toxins in the bile and turn it into kind of like a stone or a sludge, so to speak. So it's holding on to that toxin for you to prevent it from going all over your body. And I think that's really amazing. I mean, it's too bad it can't just get rid of it, but it's smart enough to protect you from getting sicker than you already are. So hopefully if you're watching this, you've gotten something out of this video by now. I really hope it can help a lot of people. So before I end this video, I'd like to kind of tell you where we are now. So where my wife and I are with this. So we essentially left our house. This is a hotel room right now that we're in. And we left our house. It was a hard decision. I mean, we lived there for 3 years. We love the place, but it's making us sick. And we're pretty sure of it, because when my wife was in Florida with me, she felt better too. And you know, she was in the emergency room last night. She had her eyes, I noticed, were starting to turn yellow, and I took her to the doctor right away, and they ran some blood tests and said, you need to go to the ER right away. She's sick. They want to remove her gallbladder, but it's not an emergency right now. So we're trying to see if this flush can help her. She's had some trouble getting some of the stones out. So there are herbs like Chanca piedra and probably some others I can't think of right now that can help to break up the stones and into smaller pieces and get them out of your body. I think she's just a little backed up right now. Her toxic burden is very high. Her liver enzymes are high, which is the reason for the ER visit. But guys, for me, this liver flush has been life-changing. I hope it can do the same for my wife and for you. You know, and I'm not a doctor, so I guess I better throw the disclaimer out there. You know, anything that you try is at your own risk, but I can tell you that for me, this has been life-changing. And even though I'm still sick right now, you know, like I said, the digestive issues are coming back. I'm out of that house now, and I intend to stay out of that house for a long period of time. See if I can reduplicate the experience that I had in Florida, where, you know, my wife and I felt fantastic. And if I can, you know, well, I'm going to keep doing the liver flushes either way. But for me, this is my cure. So I sincerely hope that that it helps somebody else too. Sorry for the long video. It's 30 minutes. There's a lot to talk about. Thank you so much for watching. If you comment on my video, I will try and reply to you. And one more thing, I'll put a link to the SIBO discussion group down there in the comments, so you guys can check that out too if you have any questions relating to SIBO or IBS. There's some really great people there and a lot of good information. So peace out, and I'll see you in the next one.